What's up, everybody? Happy October. It is day 4 of 31 Days of Halloween, and for day 4, I got to go to the theaters and see the new movie Smile. So Smile is a new horror film directed by Parker Finn. This is actually his first film, and that combined with the marketing and the way this film looked makes it really surprising that I genuinely really enjoyed this film. So the marketing for this film was pretty clever, but I feel like the poster and the trailer and everything I saw about it just really screamed, Blumhouse, Truth or Dare, and unfortunately that's a comparison that sucks to make because Truth or Dare is, while it's kind of an entertaining film, I didn't hate it. It's definitely a cheap, crappy, low-budget version of what this film could have been. It's really unfair to compare this movie to Truth or Dare because it is so much better of a film. The movie is also produced by Paramount, which was kind of a surprise because it just, like I said, the marketing really screams Blumhouse, and everything's been kind of Blumhouse and A24, and then movies like these that sort of are these low budget first time directors, but not in like the way of the artsy films that A24 does, usually turn out kind of like Truth or Dare. They're always like a coin toss, whether or not they're going to be worth watching or if they're just going to be complete trash. So starting off with the things I really liked how this movie was filmed. I think it's filmed really well. It feels like the director really knows what he's doing behind the camera, and you can tell it's a low budget film. It definitely has minimal locations, and they couldn't afford a lot of really big shots or anything like that, but they made good use of their budget and got really creative with what they were doing. The movie opens up with a one shot, and when a movie can open up like that, it makes you feel like you're in good hands, and you're kind of like, it sets off the tone for the rest of the film. Immediately, you feel like, okay, I'm in for this. I'm in good hands. I'm trusting the director. I know what he's doing. So right off with that oneer that really brings you into the environment, opens up the story. It was really impressive. The other thing they really did was there's a lot of drone shots in the film. Again, because of budgetary reasons, and a lot of the transitions are just simple drone shots, but they make really good use of them. They do that thing you kind of see in films a lot where they start off with just like a regular drone landscape shot, and then they kind of flip it upside down or they flip the horizon, and it creates this really cool, creepy atmosphere. But I feel like they do it really well, and it does help set the tone and really create, in addition to the sound design, create good transitions that keep the tension going throughout the film. The other thing I really appreciated is there's a shot in the beginning of the film that's another drone shot. It's a transition to the hospital setting where the main character works. They sort of open up on the drone shot, and then you see the ambulance pulling up, but then they sort of stop on the ambulance, and you see the character we're going to be introduced to in a couple minutes coming out of the ambulance and being pushed into the hospital, all from a drone shot. And then the drone goes in through the window and it cuts inside of the room. It's a really creative and effective way to use minimal locations. It's just one outside exterior location and then going into one interior location, but it feels big. It doesn't feel like just a drone transition shot into a room. They made it feel really smooth, kept the tension, and really kept you involved in the story, wondering what was going on with this patient that we were seeing, and just made really good use of the budget. The other thing I really liked is Sosie Bacon in this. She's our main character. She plays a psychiatrist in this, and the movie really rides on her. We spend the most time with her, and she really carries the film. She's really excellent in this. I think she did a really good job playing the doctor first, and she felt really grounded and like she really cared about her patients, which really sets up the story and sort of the messages and themes that they're trying to get across to you later in the film. Sosie Bacon is really believable as the doctor initially. She really seems like she cares about her characters, and that sets up the themes that they're trying to get across to you later in the film. Without that anchor, I feel like those themes don't come across as well. So fortunately, she really carries it. She's believable, and she feels like she's really empathetic towards her patients, and she really cares about her job. But then when things get intense and she's starting to lose her mind or feel like she's losing her mind, you really are right along with her, where you feel like it's really believable what she's going through, her emotions. You feel like when she's scared, it's definitely earned and she should be scared. It doesn't feel like she's not acting the way that she should be in this, because she's a very intelligent woman, a very intelligent character. And so sometimes when you go from 0 to 100 and your character is just supposed to be, groveling in tears and they're petrified and they're scared of all these things, it's really hard to portray that strong character and still bring that into a lot of the horror elements. But I think Sosie Bacon does a fantastic job. I really like Kyle Gallner in this, if I'm saying that name right. I'm not the hugest fan of his. I liked him in a Nightmare on Elm Street remake. Okay. Thought he was all right in Haunting in Connecticut. And I thought, he was completely useless in Scream. Not going to get into that. He was all in it for all of 10 seconds, but I just thought he was not great in it, and he was just completely useless. He was only thrown in there to be a red herring. Regardless of that, I really enjoyed him, and he actually ended up being a character I really, really liked in this film, which I was very surprised when I saw him come on screen. I remembered that he was in this film, and I'm not the hugest fan of him. He's really, really hit and miss, but I actually think he was really good in this. I was happy to see him. And in addition to him, Kal Penn, of course, is always great. I love to see him in anything. I don't think he's really a standout, but he had a decent amount of screen time, and he was good in everything he was in. The only really standout bad acting was whatever his name is, I can't remember, guy who plays A-Train. I'm not the hugest fan of him in The Boys, and I didn't really like him in this. And I'm a little torn because his character is supposed to be sort of a not likable character. You're not supposed to relate to him, but I think he just wasn't very good in this at all. I think he didn't have a lot to work with. It was intentional that his character turned out the way he did, but I also just don't think he was good. Continuing with all the things I really enjoyed about this movie was the music. It's very, it's kind of a little over the top sometimes, but I think it's really well done and well used. They use a lot of silence in this film, which works really well for continuing the tension. But in addition to music, the sound design is fantastic in this film. Again, it could be a little over the top. It's very intentional, especially with transition scenes. There's a lot of jump scares in this film. So with those jump scares, of course, the sound design is going to be a really important factor. And it works really, really well. They do a great job. It is definitely a little over the top, but again, intentionally so. It could bug some people, but I feel like they did it in such a great way that it really worked. In a movie like this that's littered with jump scares, unfortunately, that has a tendency to drain all the tension from the film. If you've ever seen Chris Duckman's video, The Problem with Horror Movies Today, it's just like that. It just drains all the tension from the film when there's jump scare after jump scare, especially false jump scares. Fortunately, Smile, I think, does a really, really good job, although it is littered with jump scares, of being very creative, using that sound design and coming up with really creative, inventive new ways to put a twist on the classic jump scare. In addition to that, the transitions and the sound design do a really good job of keeping you in the scene and continuing to build tension as the film goes. Of course, it helps that the jump scares are not false jump scares. They're all things you should actually be afraid of in the film. So it doesn't quite drain all the tension, but it has a tendency that it can do that when you're on alert all the time, to just not care about the in-between scenes when she's driving and she's figuring out the plot and what's going on. But the movie does such a good job with the transitions and the sound design of just keeping the tension nailed in the whole time. So you're really on the edge of your seat through the entire runtime. The other thing I really liked were the effects. There is some blood, there's some gore in this. There is also some CGI, which I'll get into in a minute, that I did not enjoy, but when they used practical effects in this, they looked really good. In particular, one of the opening scenes where there's a lot of really close-up effects that you see, and it looks really good. And when they use the practical in addition with the CGI, it definitely helps make it look really good. It definitely looks a lot better than it could have if they'd just gone straight CGI. On that note, I really appreciate that they also let their actors do the scares with the smiles in this film, because it could be such an easy thing to really try to manipulate it with CGI, like Truth or Dare, with those just over-the-top CGI faces. But they really have a lot of restraint in letting the actors portray their own variation of the smile, and each actor does look a little bit different when they do it. It really adds to the story, and I think it makes sense with what's happening. The other thing I'm going to say I really liked is also a negative, unfortunately, but it's the story itself. While it's a negative because it's very predictable, it's also a positive because I feel like they did a really, really good job with telling a very predictable story. You're getting exactly what you thought you would get when you go into it, but done in so much better of a way. It's like all of the most predictable elements that you think that you would get done in the best possible way. So you really come out with a highly entertaining film, even though I could see what was coming from a mile away for most of it. You know exactly where it's going, especially if you've seen The Ring or It Follows. It borrows very heavily from both of those films, and just from any curse film in general. It's really obvious where it's going, how the curse works. It's easy to predict, but it's done in such a way that I even though I knew it was coming, I never didn't want to watch what was coming next. Even the most boring parts, or what would normally be boring in a curse film like this, I was still enjoying it. I was on the edge of my seat. And even things scares that you know are coming, they're always just kind of find a new way to put a little bit of a different twist on it to still keep you on the edge of your seat and surprise you. And I found myself being continually surprised by a lot of the scares in this film. Now I touch a little bit on things I was torn on. First off is the use of color in this film. The use of color in this film is very unique. Right off the bat, there's like a room is filled with pinks, like really bright pinks and teals. It's very obvious there's pink walls in the hospital, and the main character is wearing like these teal and shades of blue. And then her office, or the room where she talks to her patients, is painted teal, and there's pink shutters on the wall. And it's really, really clear that it's very intentional, the use of color, almost like happy and positive. And I think maybe that might have been the point. Maybe it's sort of trying to be kind of off-putting with how contradictory these colors are and how sort of vibrant and poppy they are. It did make it feel almost like it was a kid's playroom a little bit, and some of the sets felt a little almost too perfect, a little almost empty in a way, because everything was so perfect and there's these bright colors, and it just felt a little off. I wasn't quite sure what they were going with. Anytime you see the sister in this film, she's always wearing pink, and her husband is also wearing pink. The main character is wearing blue or teal. It's not that I didn't like it or appreciate it. I thought it was unique. I just couldn't quite figure out exactly what they were going for. So the main character, she descends into darkness. I guess she starts to wear more earthy colors, dark, more monochromatic outfits. And so that's clearly trying to indicate her mental state, but it felt like they were trying to say more with the colors in this film, and I couldn't quite get it. I think maybe they were trying to touch on the sort of outer appearance and the smile that we put on. I know that the director had said in an interview that this film wanted to talk a little bit about how people wear a fake smile as a mask. And so I think the colors sort of portray that a little bit. People are wearing such vibrant colors on the outside, and on the inside, they're really fake, or they're manipulating, and they're just kind of putting on this show. I just didn't exactly know what the director was going for with that. The other thing I was kind of torn on was once we get towards the end, and the creature design, especially at the very end, it sort of lacked a little bit for me. They do something with CGI. It doesn't look terrible, but I'm never the biggest fan of when they do that, this specific thing, without getting into spoilers, in films. And it just sort of took me out a little bit. Thought it was creepier seeing the actors just do the smile, and it was working a lot better before until we really got to the creature at the end. In addition to that, there is a sort of another manipulation of the creature at the very, very end. I did appreciate that more. I think it salvaged what I didn't appreciate that they had gone for, and it made me like it a little more, but it just still was not my favorite thing. It's not my favorite thing to see in horror films, especially with creature design. So I don't know, I'm a little torn on it. I think they did a good job, especially with the budget. CGI is a little iffy here and there. It definitely looks passable. The other funny thing I'm a little torn on is sort of a weird thing, but it's the opening credits to the film. There's a there's a really cool, tense opening, and then as soon as you see the credits, like the actual title of the film, Smile, it does this really weird thing where it's kind of like zooming in, and it looks kind of cool. It's sort of letting you in on this vibe that you're in for. It still doesn't quite fit the opening of the scene, but at the very end, it sort of shakes. It does this really weird thing. I know it was intentional, but it felt very jarring. It sort of immediately made me feel like it was sort of a cheap effect, and I would have liked to seen just the title just swell and take over the screen and then just disappear. The last little shake, just like something about it, I was like, why'd you do that? The last thing I was really torn on is the character of the sister and the husband. They're just so fake, and they're supposed to be fake. It's clearly intentional, but they're just such like cut out, copy and paste, just caricatures of what they're supposed to be. You know, they're very surface level characters, and it's obviously intentional for the film, and they're trying to get these themes across with these characters and how they interact with our main character, but it still does feel like they're just sort of just caricatures of who they're supposed to be rather than fully developed characters. Now onto the things I really didn't like about the film, and first and foremost is just it's super predictable. It is, I already touched on that a little bit, but it is a very predictable story. You're getting exactly what you think you are going to get. As soon as you go in and you think this is going to happen, it's exactly what happens. Again, as I touched on, I think they do a really, really good job with that. But unfortunately, it still is a very predictable story. The other thing I really didn't like about the film is just the marketing and the way this film looks so much like all these other cheap, low-budget horror films. I feel like it hurts the film. It's making okay money, which is great, but I do feel like it just cheapens it, and I'm glad it's getting really good reviews. I'm glad people are enjoying it. I just feel like it's making it so this film is fighting an uphill battle because you're going in expecting this sort of joke of a film, not really sure what you're going to get. Fortunately, it is a really good film, but I can see how, if you don't take it seriously, I could see how it's not going to impact you. You're not going to have the same experience that I had. The other thing I really don't like about this movie is the fact that it's making more than Barbarian. Smile's already made more, according to IMDb, in the box office than Barbarian has. Go see Barbarian. Pay to go see it. So I gave Smile 4 stars. That rating could go down in time, but I just was really impressed overall with coming out of the theater. I felt like I was tense and on the edge of my seat the entire time. I really enjoyed it. I just had a blast. My wife was sitting there watching the movie through her hands, and that's always a plus when the movie creeps you out. It doesn't quite last and stick with you like films like Hereditary or The Witch might, but it did still give me sort of an uneasy feel as I went home, and it lasted for a while. I kept thinking about it. It's not one of those movies that's really going to stick with you for weeks on end. So thanks everybody for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow for day 5, 31 days on Halloween.